Alrighty, let's go ahead and start working on the actual game itself, the actual components that we are going to use to render out the game. So let's start off in our game.js. I'm going to begin by implementing the sidebar, the game sidebar. Now, before I implement the game sidebar, there is going to be a stateless component that we're going to be using called player list. So I'll stub that out first. I'll stub out player list, of course, with an uppercase P because it is a component, a stateless component. And it's going to accept a prop of players. And I'm just going to return, I don't know, players map, P goes into p.name, join, comma. We're going to obviously fill that out a lot later, but for now that'll do. Now let's jump back up to the game sidebar. We're just going to go straight down in this component. It's pretty straightforward. So we'll start off with the constructor, props, super props, just like usual. And then we're going to have two actions. I'm going to say this underscore exit game is going to equal this dot props dot router dot push / So we're simply going to go back to the lobby. Then I'm going to implement this underscore login, which will simply say this dot dispatch, not this dot request, but this dot dispatch, a dot dialog set, a dot dialog login, true. So it'll simply display the login dialog. Next up, let's go ahead and do our component will mount. And for this, we need a couple stores. So const stores colon user game, which will equal this context. And then we'll simply subscribe to user.op login money. Op login goes into this dot set state op login. Then we'll also subscribe to the game state. So we'll do game view money. Then game goes into this set state game. So now we are subscribed to the op login as well as the game itself. Now let's render. Whoops, we already have a render method, of course. For the render method, we are first going to extract out op login and game from this dot state. Then I'm going to return out some stuff. I'm going to return out section with a class name of c-game-sidebar. Then I'm going to open up our sidebar buttons. I think they're called sidebar buttons. Let me verify with the lobby real fast. Yes, sidebar buttons. So I'm going to open up a div class name equals sidebar buttons. And inside of sidebar buttons, we are going to have a, the first button will appear only if we can log in. So I'm going to say, if not, op login can, question mark null, colon, followed by a button. And the button will have a class name of m-button primary. The on-click will be simply this underscore login. And then the text will simply be login to join game. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and have our exit game button. But our exit game button is always going to appear. It's simply going to be m-button with an on-click of this exit game, which will simply say leave game. Then, down here, I'm going to say if if game.step does not equal a step disposed, or sorry, equals a step disposed, question mark null, colon, followed by executing our player list. And our player list will have a property of players equals game.players. And that's our sidebar. So if you want to take a look at that, and then let's go ahead and actually jump over back into our game and see if this renders properly. So if we come back over here and hit refresh, we get an error. A valid React element of null must be returned or have a return undefined, blah, 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 blah. I don't know why it's mad at me. Oh, because I'm returning a string, derp. I need to wrap this in a JSX element. Sorry, I have the dumb. And then, of course, I have to do that. Okay, so now, if I come over here, we have login to join game, leave game, and then we have our player list. Now, if I hit leave game, it simply sends us back to the lobby. which is fantastic. If I say login to join game, we get our login dialog. I can put in my name, hit enter, and now the login dialog disappears because we can no longer log in since we are logged in. So now let's implement our player list. So before we implement the player list, I'm going to implement two helper functions. And these helper functions will return classes and text depending on the state of the game. So I'm going to say function get player status, and it's simply going to have a deconstruction of is czar, is winner, and is playing. And I'm going to say if is czar, then I'm going to return an array of is-czar followed by czar. So the first item in the array is going to be the class name added to the element of the player, and the second one is going to be the text that is going to appear. Then I'm going to say if is winner, return is winner followed by winner with an exclamation point, because that's forward-facing text. Then is playing, if they're still playing, if they haven't played a card yet, we'll do is playing followed by playing. And then finally at the end, we'll simply return an array with 2 empty strings. All right, so now on our player list, we can remove what we have there already and replace it with a UL with the class name of c-player-list and the UL. Then I'm going to say players.map, player goes into. I'm going to open up a multi-line anonymous function here. I'm not going to use a single line lambda. And I'm going to say const, and I'm going to use array deconstruction for CLS, because class is a reserved name, followed by status. And I'm going to say equals get player status player. Then I'm going to say return, and I'm going to open up these parentheses. I'm going to say return li key equals player ID, class name equals CLS. Then inside of this li, I'm going to do div class name equals details, and that div. Inside of the div, I'll do div class name equals name, followed by player.name, not surprisingly, and then div class name equals score, followed by player.score. But in addition, I'm also going to do another one. I'm going to say player.score equals 1, question mark, and then in quotes, space point, followed by colon points. That's because these two things will get concatenated without a space. So we have to add the space inside of these suffixes. Then, at the end of this, I'm going to say div class name equals status, and the status will simply render out the word, or the variable status. Now, with that all done, it rendered properly over for me of the basic markup. So that's just the basic markup. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to jump back into our game store. I'm actually going to, in our player list, I'm going to do some fancy stuff. I'm going to say one guy is the czar and he's not playing. Let's say Blez is playing. Let's say, actually, let's make me the winner. Then let's give some scores to people so things look a little bit more interesting. And this will never happen. You'll never have a winner and another person playing at the same time, but this will allow us to test out our status messages and classes. So now we see Nelson is the winner with 3 points, Blaz playing, Woe is the czar, and Stuff is neither playing nor the czar, nor winning. All right, so now let's take one last look at these components. That's the player list, and this is the game sidebar. Now let's do everybody's favorite thing and style it. So let's jump into game.scss, and I'm going to move my Chrome window over here so that we can watch as we style the sidebar. Okay, first thing we're going to do is import /variables. Then we're going to do c-player-list. We're going to include unlistify. Now immediately, that's going to go ahead and remove all of the list visual elements. Then we're going to set a border top of 1 pixel solid color section border, a position of relative, a flex grow of 1, and an overflow Y of auto. So what this will do is this will make it so if there's too many players, you'll get a scroll bar. As you can see, if I scroll this down, we're not quite getting the scroll bar yet, unfortunately. But we can fix that by actually styling the game sidebar itself. Actually, why don't we do that real fast? I'm going to say c-game-sidebar. See, the problem is the way this currently is set up, this sidebar is not flexed, meaning the C-game sidebar does not stretch down all the way to the bottom like it should. So to fix it, all we have to do on the C-game sidebar is give it a display of flex, a flex direction of column, and a flex grow of 1. Let's start off with the flex grow of 1. Now you'll notice that the sidebar fills the entire remaining space. Then let's give it a display of flex and a flex direction of column. And that'll make it so the C player list takes up the rest of the space. So now I can move this down and we get a scroll bar for all the players if there's too many players to fit on the screen. So you want to make sure that that works as well. All right, so for the C player list, we'll start with li. We'll do a padding of 5px left and right, or top and down, and then 10px left and right, and a border bottom of 1px solid color section border. Then, not surprisingly, because you know I love it so much, we're going to give it a display of flex, and then we're going to give it a transition of background 150 milliseconds. Let's do a cubic Bezier. I could have done ease out or ease in, but I really like that that half circle cubic Bezier. It's really nice looking. Next up, we'll style the details to have a flex grow of 1, which is going to push all of the status messages all the way to the right. And then for the name, we'll give the name a font weight of bold and a margin of bottom of 5 pixels. Then underneath details, we'll style status and say align self center. That will align the status to the center vertically. And I think that's looking pretty good. Now what we have to do is style the individual classes. So for example, we need to do is_var status is going to have a color of color primary, followed by a font weight of bold. So this will style the zar, as you can see. Then we'll do is_playing status. We'll simply have a font style of italic. So now playing is italic. And then we'll do is_winner. This will be more fun. We'll have a background of color primary, my favorite blue, a color of color primary text, a border of none, and then we have to replace the border with a margin bottom of 1px to push it down after the border is no longer there. And then now, as you can see, we are now winning. Actually, this cubic Bezier works better if we give it like a 500 millisecond delay. So now if I take off this, there we go. Okay, that looks good. You guys might not have seen it with the low frame rate, but it really did make a difference. Anyway, so that is the game sidebar. That's really all there is to it. So let's start at the top and scroll down so you guys can take a look at my awesome CSS. And I think we'll end the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.